Hey everyone, welcome back. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to paint this peaceful sunset river scene step by step. You'll learn how to create realistic grass, reflections on the water, and how to blend your acrylics more easily, even if you're a beginner. Plus, I'll show you how to mix my own custom shades so you can get natural looking colors without needing a huge paint collection. And one more thing, I am giving this original painting to one of you watching. To enter, just leave a comment below with your favorite tutorial you've done from the channel and why. I'll announce the winner in a YouTube post at the end of June. Alright, let's jump in and get started. For my canvas, I'm using a 14 by 18 inch gallery canvas. It already has gesso coat on it, and all I did to prepare it was add a glaze of water everywhere and let it naturally dry, and it made my canvas tighter. For brushes, we're going to use two of my M1 blending brushes. And then this is a size smaller, an M2 blending brush. For my 4-piece brush set, I'm going to use my number 8 and number 4. They're the same thing, just a size smaller. And then we have a 1/2 inch flat brush and a 0 detail brush. For my paint, I'm going to use my 24 set of acrylics here, and I'll show you which colors from this set. We need medium yellow, orange, scarlet red, sap green, phthalo blue, and lamp black. For my 5 set of acrylics, I'm going to use titanium white. We need a palette, and I'm going to use my palette paper here. Very easy to use because once you're done, there's 40 sheets. You just tear the sheet and throw it away instead of putting paint over the sink and washing, taking that time to do that. And then of course we need a palette knife to mix your paint. This one bends easy, so it's easier to mix the colors. Sometimes you get palette knives that are rough to bend, right? So make sure your palette knife is nice and bendable. Something like this. Some paper towels to dab your brushes onto if you have too much water, or just wipe off some of the paint, right? Or clean your palette knife. And as always, a jar of water somewhere next to your canvas. I have a little table right here on the bottom where I have all my materials laid out so I can work easily and reach for colors or brushes I need. Remember, you could use any materials you have available. If your paint is a little bit of a shade different than mine, that's okay. But if you'd like to use exactly what I'm using, they are available at ColorByFeliks.com. Alright, I'm going to quickly explain how we're going to work in sections. So at any point you can take a break after you're done with a certain section, right? You can come back to it the next day or whenever you have free time. So I always start from the furthest distance and work my way up to whatever is closest to me and finalize by detailing everything and coming back to the parts I need to towards the end, right? But first, we're going to create a blend of the sky, and this is the middle of the canvas, but I'm going to go a little higher as always because I think it looks the best if you don't have it right in the middle, the horizon line. So I'm going to have it a little bit higher somewhere here, and this is going to be the sky, right? We're going to have a sunset sky with some clouds and the sun glowing, and then after laying out my sky colors, we're going to add a sun and then sketch out our clouds where we want them to be, and then add the second and third layer to detail the clouds. Once we're done with that, the next closest thing towards us is the faraway land, and we're going to have a little river here and some land and maybe grass and flowers and some rocks in the water, and we're going to detail everything. So if you enjoy these full-length tutorials, the best way to support my channel is by joining my Patreon page. Because of the support of my patrons, I'm able to create these full-length tutorials for you. And if you aren't able to, that's totally fine. Another way is to like and subscribe and share to those who would be interested in learning how to paint with acrylics. I appreciate my patrons and everyone who supported me over the years. I couldn't have done this without you, so thank you. Now let's get to mixing. Okay, so here's my palette, and I quickly added a thumb amount of white here. 4 colors, right, from lightest to darkest, and then a little less than this one I added here, and then less on this one, almost the same as this amount of white, and then half a thumb amount of white on this last one. I added more orange, about a thumb amount of orange, and then a little bit of medium yellow, and then a little less orange and scarlet red right here, a small amount, and then scarlet red and phthalo blue here, and then more phthalo blue and a touch of lamp black. So I'm going to quickly mix these colors, and then if I need to add more, I will show you what I have. So remember to mix from lightest to darkest, and as I was mixing, I like these colors so far. So it's like a light orange going into like a red pinkish color, and then transition into like a violet because we added a touch of blue, right? And then this one, you could see the blue and the pink transition pretty quick, so I added a little bit of red, a little more red on this one. So I'm going to mix this and see what we get. And finally, I also decided to add red to this one because I feel like this is lighter than these colors. So I want to create a transition from lightest color going into a darker color, right? So I added a little bit red here as well. Okay, now I'm going to dab my palette knife in the water and then use a paper towel to quickly wipe it so it could be somewhat clean. And then we're going to start to mix these colors onto our canvas. So I'm going to bring the camera closer, but these are the colors I have. So if you get something similar, you're good to go. Okay, right here. And now, remember, we're going to cover about this much of the canvas. Let's pick up our water jar and one of our M1 blending brushes. We're going to dab it all the way in the water and then squeeze part of the water out. Not everything. You still want a little bit of water in there. We don't want to squeeze too hard, right? Because water with acrylics, if you mix it equally and swirl and blend it evenly, it allows it to dry slower. So when you lay down your colors, you can then use your dry blending brush to quickly blend all the colors in without the paint drying. And this is a quick process. Usually takes me about 5 to at the most 10 minutes for this section. And depending on how big the canvas is, right? So let's start with this orange color we have mixed. Pick up the paint like this. Okay, and right in the middle, that's where the brightest sun, the glow will be. And we're gonna swirl it. And if you see bubbles, that's good. If you see paint dripping, that means you have too much water. I'd recommend picking up more paint and then just blend it and try to even spread the paint so it can evenly, spread everywhere and that the paint won't drip. And I'm dabbing my brush just the tip in the water, and if I feel like I need more water, right? So I'm gonna add a little more orange like this. And now I'm gonna dab my brush in the water, just the tip, and then pick up my next color. Real quick on both sides. We're gonna create a nice glow, a transition from that orange. I'm gonna dab my brush in the water, pick up more of this red color, kind of swirl it and lightly blend, not too much blend, just a little blend. Okay, lightly dab my brush, pick up the next color. Okay, and then we're gonna start to add a little bit of a darker color because it goes into the sky more. We want to create a nice glow. And you can work and move your canvas flat if you want to, whatever is easiest for you. Okay, so I'm going to dab my brush in the water, and I'm going to pick up my darkest color and swirl this color here. Maybe pick this one and this one together, mix it in. Try to get a little bit of a blend, but not too much. We don't want to go down too much with this color. But around there, I'm going to add a little more of this color into my corners of the darkest color. There you go. Okay, something like this. Now I'm going to put my brush down in the water, and then I'm going to pick up a dry blending brush and quickly blend everything from lightest to darkest, swirling, taking away the brush strokes. And sometimes, you know, I go over the colors again because I have paint left. So I'm going to do this sometimes if I want to. If I didn't like my first blend, I'll go over doing the same technique to create even more of a smoother transition. So it's totally up to you. If you didn't like your first blend, you can totally use the similar colors. It doesn't have to be exactly. And go over and do this method again. And you're going to get a very nice smooth blend. But you could see it's taking away all the nice brush strokes, and we have a beautiful, beautiful blend from lightest colors to this blue, darker colors. There you go. So I'm going to let this dry, clean my blending brushes, and then we're going to continue sketching our clouds in the sunlight. Okay, my background is dry, and by the way, it takes about 20-30 minutes for the background to dry, but I forgot to mention that I use a hair dryer to speed up the process. If you have one of those, you can use that. But I cleaned my blending brushes and got a new water jar, and while I mix my next colors for the clouds, I'm going to put my number 8 and number 4 brushes in the water and let my brushes become soft. So let them sit there for a few minutes while I mix colors. And also, the way I clean my blending brushes, I use a little bit of, you could use brush soap or dish soap, a little bit on your palm, and over running warm water, and you swirl it. Swirl and then until the paint is all gone, and then you squeeze the water out gently, and then use paper towels to kind of take away as much water as you can, swirl again, and get it fluffy back up like this. Okay, so this is what I have. A little bit of white straight out of the tube by itself, a thumb amount of white here, and then medium yellow and orange, small amount. Less white, a little more orange and scarlet red, and then less white here, about the same amount of scarlet red right here, and phthalo blue. Let's mix these and we'll see what we get. So I decided to add a little more red and phthalo blue to this one. I want to make this one a little darker. And then I also added a little bit of white and scarlet red. So I want to mix and create more of a like a pink. I'm going to take part of this color, just a small amount, mix it with this first. I want to create a like a pinkish color, almost like an in-between between these, right? This bright color, and transition into this orange. But something like this, maybe actually, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, let's add a little more red. A little more red. And these are the first layers of our clouds. We're gonna, so a little more red. We're gonna be adding, to create a smooth, look to your painting, you have to add multiple layers to take away those brush strokes and things like that. You go over it a few times. So that's a little better. Let's use this color. So that's why I actually prefer acrylics to dry faster, because then when it dries, you can add another layer on top and it becomes solid and cleaner. And you can even add another layer and another. And the more layers you add, it's easier to drag the paint and create smooth blends, because you already have a layer of the color in the background, right? And then you add another one, and then with a little bit of damp brush, you're able to, pull paint because it's rubbery. So you're able to really get that smooth blend like oils with acrylics, the more layers you add. It's really all about layering. And here's the colors we have. So something like this, white, light yellow, lighter than this orange, because we're going to add highlights, right? And then we're going to add some clouds with these colors right here. Okay, so something like this and you'll be good to go. First, we're going to pick up our number 4 brush, dab it on the paper towel so you won't have too much water, but it's nice and damp and soft, right? We're going to start with white and add our sun. Okay, that's the next closest thing towards us. So a little bit of white with a little bit of water, and we're going to have, so this is the middle of the canvas right here where I end. I'm going to go a little higher, so my horizon line is going to be somewhere, I'm guessing, right there. So this is going to be the horizon line. So I'm going to have the sun. I'm going to have like a little cloud right here, and I'm going to actually have the sun be right in here. And try to eyeball it. Try to center it and eyeball it. And you can make your sun as big as you want. Right? I'm going to dab my brush in water and tap it on the paper towel so you can run smoothly. And I'm going to quickly try to make it as circular as I can. You could also use your detail brush if you wanted to make it smooth, even smoother. Okay, so I'm looking at this and I hope it's in the middle, and I think it is. So I am happy with where it's at. So before I add another layer, I'm gonna let this dry, because if I keep adding more paint, it's just gonna really peel off the paint, right? You want to make sure this layer is dry, and once I add another layer, it's gonna be even more solid. So while that's drying, I'm gonna dab my brush in water and kind of clean out my brush real quick, not fully, but just a little bit. And then I'm gonna actually squeeze out a little bit of medium yellow out of the tube, and then we're gonna use a little bit of this medium yellow, very small amount, and around the edges we're gonna create a glow. Okay, I'm gonna dab my brush slightly in the water and pick up more of this medium yellow and go around the edges, create that yellow glow. Okay, water, you see how water, it spreads the paint and makes it smooth. That's what we want. So I'm going to gently blend it out like this. Okay, so we got a smooth, and it's mostly water, so once it dries, this is going to get dark again, a little darker, so I don't have too much paint. I'm always working with a little bit of paint. So now we got kind of the idea of where we want the sun to be. Now let's shape out our clouds and add, details to where we want them to be, right? So I'm going to start with the bottom area, and we're going to let's start with the darkest color. So I dab my brush in water and tap it on the paper towel lightly, so it will be more, not too much water, but a little bit so it can run smooth. And we're going to have our first cloud be right in here, straight. This one's going to be, and you can eyeball it, and it doesn't have to be super straight. You can make it a little bit. Okay, we're just going to continue that. And it's going to fade out somewhere in there. And then you continue using this color. I'm going to pick it up here, and right by the sun, I'm going to dab my brush slightly in the water. We're going to create our shape of our cloud. So here, right by the sun, I want to use the same color. Okay, this darkest color we have mixed with water, and we're just creating our shape of our clouds. Get an idea down first. I swirl my number 4 brush, move the paint around, and here, and we're going to have a bigger one. And it's just going to go up like this. Okay, and you can have your shape be totally how you think would, you know, how you want it. Maybe you want yours to be a little less fluffy, maybe you want it bigger, whatever you want. This is totally up to you, this part. Okay, so something like this. So this is all going to be filled in. Let's use this color. And kind of give it a base coat right here. A little more of that. Maybe, you see this blue we have left? Let's use some of this blue. Let's just add that blue, whatever. We want a little bit of a color in our clouds, not just one color, right? That blue, and then as you go up, I'm going to quickly switch to my number 8 because it's bigger. As I go up, I'm going to use this pinkish color. And I know it looks rough and messy right now, but you'll see. Once we add more and more layers, you'll see. It's all going to come together nicely. So a little more of this pinkish color. Let's use a little bit of this orange right in here. Want some color in our clouds as well, why not? Back to this darkest color. Randomly fill it in like this. Okay. So we got the first cloud kind of laid out. I'm going to go back to my number 4. And I'm going to use this pink. I'm going to fade it out here. Now I'm going to use this pink and create another cloud. Use a little bit of this color. Maybe a little blue. Let's use a little blue. And a little blue in here. Give it some more pink and blue, because these are further away clouds. So I'm going to just go this way like this and have it faded. Okay, so let's use a little bit of this darkest color on the bottom right here. Okay, it's a rough sketch, but we're going to continue adding our next cloud. We're going to have it right here, and that's going to be with this orange. Let's start with this orange, and right next to the sun, we're going to have a cloud. And we're going to actually use the darker color. Mix it in. As you go up, the cloud gets a little darker. So let's use a little bit of this darkest color. Randomly fade it out. Okay, let's continue with this darkest color and add another shape of our clouds in here. Fade it out randomly. Here we're going to obviously add more layers to our clouds, but we're getting the base down. Okay. I'm going to pick up my number 8 brush real quick. Change my brushes. And we're going to add a little bit of this and orange. Mix those two together. And right here we're going to add some clouds. A little darker color. Randomly dab my brush in the water, pick up more of this orange and this darkest color, mix those together. Add some of that orange. On this cloud to give it some color. Okay, and now I'm going to use a little bit of this yellow we have mixed with water. Dab my brush in the water, tap it on the paper towel. Use this yellow, and if you have other colors mixed with it, that's okay. And right underneath where you added, we're going to gently add. I'm going to dab my brush slightly in the water, pick up a little bit of, mix it with orange, a little more orange, and randomly right on the bottom of them, swirl, gently press, and go over and add your highlights. Super easy and fun to do, because there's no right way of putting where you want your clouds to be, right? So gently add it on one side. Remember, the light is hitting them, so more on the bottom of each cloud. Okay, here I'm going to use a little more orange and yellow. So a little more orange. And it's a lot of back and forth, but you know, once you have your shape of your clouds, you can then correct and add more layers, and that's what we'll do. We're just shaping out, getting the idea, quick idea. Okay, a little bit in here. And switch my brush to number 4 again for the little parts, little clouds. And I'm going to continue adding that orange and yellow, something like this. And we're going to go over this one. Start to add highlights around it. So a little more orange right around this cloud. And because I have a little bit of water, it really does run smooth, you know, on the canvas. Blends in with the color we already added. Just gently go over it. Very simple. Use a little bit of the lighter color. Okay, a little bit more lighter color in here. And then the light color around these randomly because of the sunlight hitting them, right? We want to create the nice glow. So I'm going to dab my brush in the water so I won't have too much paint, and continue with that light color and fade it out. Okay, and we'll continue doing the same technique around these clouds right here. Make it as fluffy as you can. You can even actually use a little more white because it's closer to the sun. So this is going to be the brightest glow. So not too much white, but just mix it with this lightest orange, yellow color with white. And we're going to, right where the sun is hitting it, that's where it's going to be the brightest. Okay, dab my brush slightly in the water and use just the yellow now, because then it fades out to more of a yellowish color. Okay, gently go over, and of course you could use your detail brush as well for these little details. You know, for now I'm just adding the first layer, and then we're gonna really make it look cleaner. And so as you go out more, let's use a little more of a darker, but still bright, darker color, orange. Maybe use a little bit of yellow, like this. Okay, swirl and fade out like that. You can go in a little bit to create depth. Okay, then we're going to go back to this color again with our number 4 and brighten up some of these maybe make a little bit of some separations from some of these clouds. Maybe in here as well, so this area won't be too empty. We're going to add a little bit of a lighter. Let's use a little bit of a orange, maybe some yellow. And you can add as much as you want. A little more orange here. Okay, let's continue with a little bit of yellow. Have fun with your colors, bright colors, and add as many little cloud separations as you want. Okay. Dab my brush in water, clean it out a little bit, and then we're going to go back to this color. I want to make some of these a little brighter like we did to this one. Same thing here. Use a little bit yellow and orange, just a little brighter colors. Okay, now I'm going to use a little bit of a pink and this yellow for fun. Let's mix that and add inside our first cloud. We're going to start to make it more 3D, more not flat, right? We want to create a little bit of separation. From some of these clouds here. Use a little more pink in this color here. And then it fades out more. Okay, a little bit more lighter color in here, in inside our cloud, just to create more depth. Not everywhere. Okay, so yes, it looks rough right now. And remember, our horizon line is right here where I painted this, so just so you guys can see it more, that's gonna be the horizon line. That's where the land is. Okay, so this is where the land is. Going down is going to be painted something else. All right, I got a rough sketch. As you can see, we can now make it cleaner and adjust some clouds, connect some clouds, whatever we want. Our first layer is down. Now we can go back and really make it look a little cleaner and nicer. So let's go back doing the same thing with the sun and white straight out of the tube and really make this one stand out. See, second layer makes my sun even more brighter. And if I added a third layer, it's really going to make it look glowy, which I will do later. And here, I'm going to add a little bit of, some rays. For example, right here, I'm going to add the white rays with water, dab my brush in water, and not too much white. So I'm not adding too much paint. I'm using more water with white, and I'm kind of adding some of them small, some of them bigger. I don't want to overdo it. Okay, got the idea down, and I'm gonna add a little more white. I know it looks rough still, but bear with me. It's gonna come together nicely. So now I added that glow. I'm gonna use just the yellow, remember, like we did, with water. I'm gonna go around right around my sun and add that yellow glow, because I want this area to really be bright. So I'm pressing my brush and swirling and spreading that yellow all around, and that will create a nice bright glow. So I'm going to switch quickly, clean my brush completely, number 8, and do the same technique. I want to add a little more glow with just the yellow and water. So a little bit of yellow with water. We're going to randomly go over and add that yellow, just yellow straight out of the tube, medium yellow. Okay, that will make our sun nice and bright. Okay, it's a very small detail, but it makes a big difference. So take your time on this and add your glaze of this color. Okay, and just fade it out. You won't see. And then also on the bottom here, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow because of the light, right here. And add that bright yellow and fade it out to the sides. There you go, not too much. Alright, so now I'm going to add my second layer on top of the clouds and start to create a little more detail to them. And obviously I'm going to go back to the sunlight and do the same thing, add another layer of white, final layer, and make my rays a little more smoother. But you know, all these layers are needed to kind of start to shape, you know, out the way we want our sun and clouds to look, right? So that's part of the process. Next, I added a little bit of white, scarlet red, and phthalo blue, and then a little more red, lemon black, and phthalo blue as the darkest color, because I want some of these clouds a hint darker to make them look more, you know, stand out, okay? So I'm going to mix those and show you what I get. Okay, so this is a little too dark, so I'm going to take part of this color, mix it with this. And we don't want it to be black, we want it to have a little red in it. And finally, I'm going to take part of this orange and I added scarlet red. I want it to be a little more on the red, darker side. For this next layer, we're trying to define it and make it more sharper. Okay, you could totally use the same colors, but I feel like I want my clouds to really pop, to stand out. So I'm going to add a little more color in a darker tones. That's what will make it stand out more. So I'm going to clean my palette knife and start with my number 8 brush. So I'm going to dab it on the paper towel, and let's start with adding this color, this bluish color that we mixed, and on the bottom I'm going to add a little bit more of a blue glaze and fade it out upwards like this. Okay. And now I'm going to use the darker color we just mixed. Okay, darker color, and on these, right? And then go over some of these. Like we did with the highlight, we added it more on the bottom of each cloud where the sunlight is hitting them. This one's going to be on top, and on the top and the wherever side. For example, here it's going to be on the right side. Here it's going to be more on the top. Here it's going to be more on the left side, the darker shadows. Okay. So I'm adding a glaze of a darker layer and let it naturally fade out. We don't want to overdo it. Same thing here. I'm going to add a darker layer on this one. Okay, and I'm going to leave this as it is. I'm not going to add everywhere. Mainly right here. As you can see, the second layer, I'm still shaping my clouds and I'm making it more defined, more sharper with color. Some of these I'm going to connect so it won't be too perfect. Okay, and here I'm going to add another one, darker one. Like this, and that's much better. So it won't look too similar, right? We want to separate, change it up a little bit. Don't want to make it all the same. Clouds are random, placed randomly. Okay, so now I'm gonna switch to number 4. I'm gonna add this, remember this reddish color we added? I'm gonna add it right on the bottom on this, gently swirl, and add that reddish darker color on the bottom of this cloud. I want this one to glow a little more from the sunlight. Look a little more warmer. And then we can fade it out. And then also we can add a little bit, let's use this orange. We can go over some of these little clouds and add a little more darker shadows randomly. Okay. Same thing here with a lighter orange color. And if you did something like this, I don't like what I added here, I'm going to dab my paper towel in the water and then wipe it gently. Clean it out a little bit. If I don't like something, very easy to fix, but of course you have to do this quickly so that the paint won't dry. But randomly wipe it off like this and you're good to go. Okay, let's continue with that reddish color and add more layers right in here. Let's add that orangey red right on this one. Mix those. Lightly dab my brush in water. Continue using that red color. Dark red, orange. Adding that glaze. Let's use a little bit of the lighter orange. Go over here and add some of these little ones. And a little bit of that red in here. Okay, I'm going to switch to number 8 brush again, and now you could see it's getting a little more smoother and cleaner. Okay, next let's add this pink, this pinkish, maybe a little bit of red. Let's go over some of these. A little more red and make it stand out a little bit more. So a little more. And it's okay if you go over your first base. That's totally fine. Oops, a little bit too much there. That's okay. I'm going to leave it and I'm going to just blend it in. So a little bit more red, maybe with this pink. Just trying to create more of a warmer tone, transitioning to that blue we added on the bottom. So a little more red. And as we go down, let's use a little bit of this color. Mix those two together, why not? Use a little more pink. It's a lot of back and forth, but we want a lot of beautiful colors in our clouds. Nice, beautiful separations, things like that. And that's why I'm adding a lot of color and going back and forth with these shades here. Okay, now I'm gonna use a little bit of this and maybe the darkest color. Okay, in this blue, we want it a little darker on the bottom. So I'm going to pick up my number 4 now and create just this darkest color with some water, and we're going to create some separations. Let's add a little bit of red. Go back to the darkest color. Let's use a little bit of this lighter pink and add make it more separated. I'm going to continue with this cloud. Maybe it comes in here and fades out like this. Maybe those are in the background. So it's a lot of like correcting and adjusting this cloud. Dip my brush in the water. Use a little bit of this and some yellow. Okay, and I'm going to go back and forth, try to adjust. So I'm going to use a little bit of this blue, try to adjust this and maybe red, make it less. A little bit of that red color, add a little bit darker shadows in your clouds. Try to take away a little bit of the sharpness of the dark color that we just added. But we still want some separations, because that's how we're creating depth, you know. As you can see, and in here, I'm going to use a little bit more yellow. All right, so I'm gonna add another highlights around my clouds. White, a little more medium yellow, and touch of orange. Mix that, and basically I want it to be brighter. So brighter, more on the yellow side, yellow-orange, than this one. This one's more like a dull, like a good first base, but now we're really gonna try to add that next detail and start to make it a little brighter. So this is the color I have. You could see the color is brighter than this one. Okay, it's a little lighter and brighter. So I'm gonna clean my number 4 and continue going back and forth with, you know, adding these layers of colors until I feel like the shapes, I'm happy with the shapes, right? So now I'm gonna go in and gently add that bright glow. Okay, from the sunlight. Here I'm going to go back to the lighter yellow color. Lightly dab my brush in the water. And that lighter color right here. On the bottom. Okay. Add a darker shadow right here for fun. If you want to create a separation. Okay, I'm going to use a little bit of red, actually a lighter orange right here. A little lighter, just because I don't want it to be too dark here. And have my brush in the water and try to fix it a little bit. Use a little bit of red. And now finally, you can, obviously, like I said, you can go back and forth until you're happy with it. You can use your detail brush and you can start to detail everything. I added white and yellow, a little bit of yellow. And with this color, we're going to add a brighter highlight. Okay, and I'll show you which color I have here. So remember, something similar, you'll be good to go. So brighter, like a yellow, white color with your detail brush. We're going to really make our clouds a little cleaner and sharper. And with water and our detail brush, we're going to swirl. And we're going to start with this one right here. And we're going to, right on the edge, we're going to create some details. So some of them are bigger maybe. Right, something like this. You could see our cloud is really coming to life now, becoming a little more sharper and cleaner. And that's exactly what we want. So with that bright color, we're going to continue adding all our highlights. So I'm going to dab my brush in the water again and continue with water and that light color. Maybe there's a little bit of a brighter highlight from the glow of the sun here. Why not? Right? It creates a beautiful separation. Gives it more depth. Okay, let's continue. Okay. And here it's going to be just the white because it's close to the sun. And we want to make it the brightest, this area. So we're going to add a glaze of white and fade it out, right? Continue to dab my brush in the water and create little transitions. Little fades like this. Okay. As you can see, it's looking a little better, right? So that's what we want. We want these little details, because if we skip them, then our painting is just going to look flat. Okay, so it's important to take your time, not rush, and create as many of these little separations as you think would look good. Let's continue doing the same thing to these clouds behind. So basically, I'm going to spend some time adding the highlights where I think it needs it. So in here, and fade it out. So that's what I'll do. I'll do that to all my clouds here. Remember, this is going to be the brightest clouds, and then right here as well, this cloud as well is going to be pretty bright. So I'm going to add brighter highlights around this cloud. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because if it's all even and the same, then you don't have those, you know, you want to skip some areas. Maybe use less. Maybe some areas just are more watered down, you know, fades out. Okay. So I'll spend some time doing these bright highlights here, and then I'll show you what I get once I'm done. All right, you can see I added a little bit of it, not too much on top, and I'm gonna also work on it and make it more cleaner. But for now, let's move on to the next part. And we're gonna work on adding another layer, last layer. So white and medium yellow with my number 4. I'm gonna add one more glaze of the lightest color. Make it super bright in the middle. Okay. And with a little bit of water and white, we're going to go over our rays. Okay, and then we're going to dab our brush in the water and use a little bit of yellow. A little bit of yellow to create a glow. A little bit more yellow, just a small touch with water. And we're going to go over it right here. A little more yellow. And then we can go over with the yellow around the sun. A little more yellow. I really want this to glow. And of course we could use also orange straight out of the tube for another transition with water. I'm going to use orange, very small amount. Okay, very small amount of orange, and right where we added the yellow, go over and add that glaze so that there will be a transition. And this is a very light glaze. It's more, I'm using more water because I don't want to make it too strong. little bit more yellow around my sun. And now I'm gonna add one more layer since I went over it with the white by itself. In the middle is the final layer, I promise. And kind of blend it out gently. And of course you could use your detail brush to correct your sun with the white and maybe a little bit of yellow. Mix those two together and correct it around the sun. Make it as circular as you can. And once you're done with adding these details, then you can step back and see if you want to add anything, any touch-ups or anything to the painting. And if you're happy with it, we can continue to the next section. All right, so I'm going to continue. I'm going to quickly sketch out my river with the colors I have, and then I'll take a break, and then we're going to continue mixing more colors for our ground here. So I'm going to use whatever I got, the darkest color, with water and my number 8 brush. I'm going to have the river be somewhere. So this is where the light of the sun is. It's going to glow. It's going to be the brightest right in here, right? So this is where it's going to be the brightest, in the middle. So I'm going to have the river kind of go in like this. And you can have it totally, the shape that you want, the movement of the river. You can make it your own. Have fun with it. It does not have to look exactly like mine, okay? Always remember that. Each painting is unique. And I'm going to bring this down about right here. So there will be some rocks, right? Some big rocks here. And then there will be like a little grassy area. Just going to use some yellow randomly. And this darkest color, why not? Just random, fill it in here. So you guys can kind of get an idea. And then the darkest color. There's going to be a bunch of rocks here. Okay, obviously we're going to go over it again. I'm just getting the river sketched out first. Okay, and then here there's going to be a bunch of flowers and things like that. Grass, right? This will be dark in here. All right, well, my colors, I ran out of colors. This is a good time to take a break. It is a new day, and I'm gonna start on the next section. So we're gonna quickly add a base of our water here, and then we're gonna kind of detail it before working on the parts of the lands here. We'll come back to those, but let's get that done real quick. These are the colors I have. About a thumb amount of white here, and then some orange, and then less white here, less orange and scarlet red, and then less white, a very small amount of scarlet red, and then phthalo blue, and then even more less white here, more phthalo blue, and less red here than this one. So I'm going to mix these, and basically the goal is to kind of get similar colors like the sky because it's reflecting to our river, right? And here we are. So similar colors like we did the first time for the sky, right? But remember, it does not have to be exactly. Now let's pick up our M2 blending brush because this is a smaller section, right? We're going to add different colors around. This is where the brightness of the sun will be hitting, so this is where the glow will start to happen, and then it'll fade to the blue colors on the sides, right? So also there is a M3 blending brush, also works great for smaller parts as well. So we're gonna dab our water, or dab our brush in the water like we do with the sky, squeeze part of the water out, and then we're gonna pick up the brightest color right here, and we're just gonna make sure we don't have too much water, but just gonna quickly pick that up like this, and right around where it's the brightest, right? This is where the light will be. So for us to get an idea, okay, right around, I'm gonna create that orange, okay? And now I'm gonna lightly dab my brush in the water, pick up the next color, and around, I'm gonna add that next color. This pinkish color here. Okay, and then the next color, I'm going to dab my brush slightly in the water. We're going to use this one. And slowly it's going to transition to the blues. Okay. Lightly dab my brush in the water, not too much. Continue. Here we're going to add a little more with this color. Okay. And then as we go out, I'm going to add the darkest color. So dab my brush in the water, pick up this blue, and let's add the blue into our river. Here, maybe mix those, why not? Okay, real quick like this, and then add that as well, just a little bit in here. Okay, that's good enough. Now quickly, before the paint dries out, let's pick up our blending brush, the M1 blending brush, and slowly swirl like we do with the sky. Take away all the brush strokes, and blend those in. Okay. Gently blend those in. Don't worry about anything else. And if you see, sometimes when you get a new blending brush, you lose some hairs. Don't even worry about plucking them out. Leave them. There's an easy way to take them out. Focus on blending, okay? So I have a few here because this blending brush, I started using it not too long ago. It's a newer one. But over time, the more you use it, the less it's going to shed. And so basically, if you do lose some hairs, I have a few here, let it naturally dry. Don't even try to take them out while the paint is wet. And I sometimes use a hair dryer and dry out my paint, and then just simply scratch it off like this, and it doesn't damage anything. And you'll see, once I dry it, I'll show you. It's like it was never there. Very easy to do and fix. Again, usually this happens when your blending brushes are new, but over time they stop shedding. So here's a quick example. I used a hair dryer to dry it out, right? And some of the loose hairs just came off. Or once it was dry, I just kind of went like this and it came off. And as you could see, you don't even see anything, no marks, like nothing was ever there. So that's the easiest way to remove some of the loose hairs if you have them. I hope that helps. And now I'm going to continue mixing their colors and start to add another layer. For the next part, I'm gonna add a little bit of white by itself, orange and medium yellow straight out of the tube, and then a little bit of white and scarlet red, and very small amount of white, scarlet red, and blue, phthalo blue. I'm gonna mix these, but while I mix, I'm gonna put my number 4 and 8 brushes in the water so that my brushes become damp. Let them sit there for a few minutes while I mix these two colors. I have a little bit of orange. I'm going to take part of this for fun so that paint won't go to waste. Mix it in. Okay. I decided to add a little more red to this one because I want it to be a little bit darker than this orange. And also the goal is to make this color be darker than this blue right here, because these colors we're going to use for ripples and shadows from the light, so we want it a hint darker for some of the parts here. Okay, remember to wipe your palette knife quickly like this and we can move on. So first things first, I'm going to pick up my number 4 brush and dab the brush on the paper towel so I won't have too much water there, and I'm going to use white like we did with the sun. I'm going to add the reflection of the sun. Try to eyeball it and make it as straight as possible. And I'm going to have it fade out somewhere here. Just white by itself. Do your best to make it straight. Something like this, okay? And now I'm gonna dab my brush in the water, tap it on the paper towel, pick up the yellow, like we did with the sun, with water. On the edges, we're gonna go over and add that glow. So I'm gonna dab my brush lightly in the water so that I can have a little more water, less paint. And I'm just gonna go like this here. Okay, and we're going to switch our brush because it's going to be a little bit, we're going to go around the yellow now with our number 8. Same technique, a little bit of water and orange straight out of the tube. Okay, we're going to add a glaze next to the next. Very, very gently. add that orange in there. Not too much, but make it a little bit, creating some shadows in our river, and lightly fade it out. And you can't really see it that much, this detail, but it does make a difference. So a little more water and orange, right where we left off with the yellow, we're gonna add that. Okay, as you can see, a little bit of that nice orange shadows and ripples start to happen. That's what we want. And then as we fade out even more, we're going to use that color we've mixed. I'm going to use, let's pick up our flat brush for this part now. Okay, flat brush, dab it in the water. And let's use a little bit of this pink color. Maybe mix it with orange. Okay. With water and this color, we're going to add a little more ripples. And we don't want to add too much, but just a little bit. To make a more water look more realistic. A little more. Mainly here where the rocks are, there's going to be more shadows and things like that. You could see that nice detail. And I'm going to fade it out. I'm not going to overdo it, but fade it out to the blue. Dab my brush in water and pick up a little more with this pink color. There will be some rocks in the river as well, so we're going to add those in later. But we want to create a little bit of details in a river so it won't look too perfect and flat. And we're gonna fade this out. And we're gonna use the darkest color. We're gonna have some rocks. So for example, there'll be a rock. I'm gonna pick some of this up. So a lot of this, there's gonna be some grass here. So like we did with the sky, you know how some of the blend went down a bit. The river is a little too wide. You could leave it as it is if you like it, but I'm gonna pick it up just a bit, maybe 2 inches right here, and there will be more grass because I want to add my flowers here as well, just a few of them there. So I'm gonna have some rocks be right here. For example, there will be a rock in the river here, and we're gonna, you know, add more details to our rocks, but a quick sketch to get an idea, the placement, right, of where we want it to be. So something like this. This will be the darker spot. Okay, there's a rock in here. Then maybe there's another rock next to it. And dab my brush in water, pick up more of this next color we've mixed. Okay. And then there'll be some little rocks. Maybe a bigger one in here. Kind of going in our in the land, and then maybe there's one right here. Totally up to you how many you want to add. I'm gonna add a couple rocks in here. And this is where we're going to have the land, right? Be. So some of the rocks are going to come down a bit as well in here. I'm dabbing my brush in the water and I'm going to quickly sketch out more of my rocks. And then you can go in, maybe add a little rock in here for fun. I'm going to make this one a little bigger. Obviously there'll be more rocks in here coming up. And as things get closer, right, the rocks are going to be a bit bigger than these ones right here. Anyway, we'll work on that in a bit, but you get the idea. And then here I'm going to add some. So remember, there's going to be, I'm going to cover a lot of this. So some of these rocks are going to actually be gone. I'm going to add a few in here. Little ones. Maybe there's one bigger one in here. I'm using the corner of my brush. Maybe there's another big one here. Something like that. And here we're going to have a dark shadow. So we're going to mix some more colors. Okay. And we could use a little bit of white. Why not? For fun. Let's add a little bit of white for fun here, just to give us an idea of our rocks. Just the white by itself. A little too much white. I'm going to go back to the purple again. This color, the darkest color. I'm having fun here. Adding all my rocks where I want them to be. But now I'm going to add a little bit of shadows. So I'm going to use water. Let's use a little bit of this pink and this purple we have mixed. Let's mix those two together, and gently we're going to add a little bit of a detail, some ripples that are darker. Okay, continue right here. Gently press. We don't want to overdo it. But here we're going to have the reflection of some of these rocks, right? So I'm going to have it come and like fade out. So I'm going to dab my brush in water and use this purple, and I'll show you what I mean. Right here, this rock right here, I'm kind of adding a little bit of that darker color, and I'm going to try to fade it out. Gently with water. Okay, and paint. We're going to have a darker shadow in here as well. So some of these we're going to go over again. But this is just to give us an idea. Let's go back to the pink because it's closer to the sun. This is going to be a little more, the shadows are going to be a little more red here, warmer. It's a lot of back and forth, but the more layers we add, gentle details into our river here. This is a very, very light color because we have more water. So we don't want to add too much of these to make it look too sharp, right? We want to make it look soft still. But we do want these details, ripples in our water and things like that, to make it look more realistic, right? Dab my brush in water. Use a little bit of this color here. Okay, something like this. And here I'm going to create a little shadow from this rock. Alright, so let's pick up our number 4 brush and do the same thing, white, like we did with the sun, right? We want to add another layer so that it could make it look even more brighter and cleaner. So with water and white by itself, we're going to add another glaze. Another soft glaze. Okay. And then back to the yellow with water, a little bit of paint, and add a glaze of this yellow on the sides. Okay. And then orange. And it's okay if you go over the ripples. It takes away the sharpness a bit, so that's actually better that you add a glaze over everything. Makes it look a little softer. So a little more orange and white, and water. Okay, very small amount. And we're just going to continue adding that bright orange glaze next to the yellow. And going to fade it out. I'm going to change my brush because I'm getting more of a bigger section to my number 8 and use more orange, same technique. And I'm using sideways. I'm not going like this. I'm going like this and like this. So whatever's comfortable for you. But these little details are important. So take your time. fade that out. Adding some color into our river. And let's add a little bit of red straight out of the tube as well. I want to add a little bit of a transition, a little bit more of a, dab my brush on a paper towel, a little bit more of a red on the sides right here, where we added the orange, another layer. Just gently add that red color straight out of the tube. So a little bit of that here, and then kind of glaze it in here. Some areas, okay. And then dab my brush slightly in the water and add a little more red on this side. Go over some of these. And it's okay if you go over the rocks and everything, because that's just a sketch. Like we did with this clouds and everything, we're going to be adding more details. And if you added too much, that's okay. Because I have water, I'm just spreading the paint around. I just want to create that nice glow, right? And we want this to be bright, transitioning to the blue. So a little more in here. And fade it out. Okay, next we're going to add a little bit of white or a little bit of orange and lamp black. And this is for the rocks. We're going to make them darker. And then phthalo blue and lamp black. Okay, so this was a little too dark, so I added a little more white and then white straight out of the tube there. And I'm going to mix this. And also, so we want it to look grayish, like a grayish, almost like a tan color because we added orange. All right, the next part is to kind of add another layer onto our rocks using our number 4. And you can see this is a very dark color. So when I mixed this one, I had a little bit of this color, so I added it to this one so it won't be just black, right? So you could see, in the video it's hard to see, but it's like a bluish, very dark bluish gray color right here. It's not pure black. So now we're going to start with the darkest color this time in our number 4. And let's just start right here where we added our rock, and we're just going to go over, start to kind of have a little bit more definition, adding more of a shadow, more of a darker glow into our rock. Okay, something like this. And we're going to continue adding it to the next rocks we have added right here. Let's make it bigger. You can play with the sizes of them as well, right? Whatever you think would look good. Okay, next I'm going to add a little bit of this color onto some of the parts here. Little brighter transition. Okay, let's continue. Take part of this and some black and let's add it to this rock right here. A little more black. Okay. And here, this is going to be covered, like I said. It's going to be covered, a lot of this, but why not? Let's add that darkest color. And this color over it. Okay, that's good enough for that one. Like I said, it might be all covered anyway. A little bit here, let's use this color. I'm going to clean up my brush, pick up this color, and add a little bit of that into this rock here. And then use white. A little bit of white right here. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush, continue with the darkest color, and we're going to add a few more here. Lightly dab my brush in water, continue. And I'm adding it on the left side here because remember, like we did with the clouds, the sun is hitting this side, so the right side is going to be the shadows, darker. Here, the left side. And I'm going over, so remember I told you this part's going to be dark. It's going to fade out and it's going to be dark all the way up to here. Okay, there's going to be a big rock in here coming in, the land, and then some in here, and then it's going to transition to grass. So we're going to go with this dark color all the way down right here. Create that shadow here. Something like that, and then we'll continue with these rocks here, right? I'm gonna bring this up here. So there'll be a grass up on top here, so okay. I'm gonna clean my brush real quick and then use this color to add a little bit of highlights. A little bit more darker color in here. Same thing with here. I'm going to add that a little bit in here. Little highlights. Not too much. Okay. And we can come back with our detail brush and make it even more smoother and better. But we just getting the base, the second layer of rocks, idea down here. All right, so now I'm going to clean my brush and add a little bit of a darker shadows using the same color with water in this color, my number 4. We're going to go over some of these and create a darker shadow, for example, and let it fade out. Right? Not too much. We don't want it to be too strong, but a little bit will make a big difference. A little bit in here. And let it fade out naturally. And then here I'm going to make it super dark. Dark reflection. right? We want to create these nice shadows. So I'm barely pressing using water. Same thing here, I'm going to go over some of these, not everywhere. And create a little bit more of a shadow. Darker shadow. And in here as well, not too much. And this part's going to be pretty dark here. Some darker shadows right along these rocks. Just glaze it over like this. And fade it out. And now we can start to add a little more detail to our water and finalize it by adding cleaner details and, highlights to make our rocks sharper looking and cleaner. So with my number 4 and some water, I'm going to use a little bit of, let's use this white and this like purplish color. We want to get a little bit of that with water. We want to create a little bit of that lighter highlight on some of these areas. For example, right here, I want to create a lighter kind of around the river right here. Maybe a little more white. Make it a little glossier and fade out. Okay. All right, little details like that. And with my detail brush, I'm going to use brighter highlights. And so instead of using white by itself, I'm going to actually mix one more color real quick, just white, and let's add a little bit of orange. Very small amount. It's going to be more white, but you could see, I'll show you. Very small amount of white and orange. I'm going to take part of this, very small amount. Okay. I want to mix those, and that's a good color. It's not too bright of a color, but we added a little bit of gray so that it won't be too strong. But the reason we want a little bit of that orange is because we want that warm glow of highlight because of the light, right? The sunlight. And so with this color and our detail brush, we're going to use water. And as always, our detail brush, we're going to swirl. And with water, we're going to go over and make it even more cleaner. For example, like this big rock here, right? We're going to add a brighter highlight kind of coming down and fading out like this. And making it a little bit more bigger and cleaner. Okay, you see that highlight here as well to this rock, right? And I'm not going in too much to the back. We're going to add another glaze of a darker shadow. But that's what I'll do with water. We don't want to also add too much on every rock. We just want to add it on some of these here. And I'm going to use more water as I go in. I don't want it to be too bright here, but I want to create a nice transition, right? Details from the bright areas to the faded rocks here. We're going to have a little bit more And we could also add that bright highlight onto our water here, right where the rocks meet. And then I'm going to fade it out like this. Okay. Like I said, you can add as much rocks and details as you want. I want to spend some time adding more rocks here, kind of filling this area up, because I want this to be a little bit, more faded. And then I want the grass here to be bright. And I'll show you once we work on the grass areas. But for now, and then another area that it's going to be bright is next to the sun, for example, right here. We want these to be very sharp, because it's right next to right like this. And then we're going to fade it out. Randomly like this. Okay. And of course you could use this color too for certain areas, for example right here. I'm going to create more of a smooth transition. And around these rocks as well, right? I'm going to go over gently with water and add some highlights so they won't look flat. And now I can go back and correct things and add more shadows, repeating the process. If I want to make it cleaner and a little more darker on some areas or whatever, right? I'm going to spend time here adding my final layers. So here, like I said, as I get closer, I want it to be more red. So I'm going to add a little bit more pink red to my shadow. Add a little bit more darker color right in here. And you can go back, you can use your flat brush or your detail brush, and with some of this pink color and water, we can connect some of these and make them a little smoother and stand out a little more, some of them, right where maybe there's some little ripples in here. These are like the final little details in our river, and we'll move on to the next part. So I'm going to spend some time kind of finalizing this area, going back and forth, same techniques like I showed you, and work on until I'm happy with the way it looks. And I'm almost there, really. I'm going to add a few more little details like this, and I think I'll call it good for now. All right, moving on to the next part. We can always come back to these sections later, but we're going to work on adding the grass right here on top and right here, and work our way down here. And so these are the colors I added. A little bit of white, and then sap green, and a touch of medium yellow, and then less white, a little bit of sap green and orange, and then less white here, more sap green here, and lamb black. As I was mixing, I decided to add more red to this one. I want it to be maybe parts of the land showing through here, so I want to make it look kind of tan color. So we'll just play with this color a little bit, and I'll show you what I get. And finally, I took part of this green because I feel like I need an even darker shade for the darker shadows, and I added lamb black and a little more sap green, and I took part of this here as well. So this will be our darkest color here. All right, so here we have these colors: light green, like a tannish color here, and then a darker green, and an even darker one here. So this is going to be kind of like the base of our grass and land right here. So let's pick up our number 4 brush, and we're going to start to first draw our faraway land. So a little bit of this darkest green, and I'm going to start to add a little bit of grass. We're going to pull the paint up like this, gently. And we're going to start to create a little bit more grass, tall grass here. And in some areas it's going to go, we're going to skip some areas and then come back and make some of these even taller. And I'm barely pressing on my canvas. And then here I'm going to have grass. Up to this area, and then do the same thing, but make these a little taller. Okay, continue with the dark shadows here. From where our rocks stop right here. And you can also do this with a detail brush to make some of them even more taller, you know, and cleaner. You can go back and with a detail brush do the same thing. Water in that green color, the darkest green, and you can, you know, create some of these a little bit taller if you wanted to. Okay. All right, that's good enough right there. And then the rest, we're gonna add, let's add a little bit of lamb black as well. And just by itself, I'm going to use my number or flat brush, and I'm gonna make this, let's use this tan color and a little bit of black. I don't want it to be too dark. So I'm gonna use a little bit of that tan color here, mix it with the black. That's good enough. And here, where we stopped, I'm gonna continue. Maybe it's a faraway mountain. Okay, something like this. Okay, and you could use your number 4 brush or your detail brush. Actually, let's use our detail brush because it's a little bit, and we can use the green. You mix it with this color again a little bit, and we can add a little bit of faraway. Maybe there's faraway trees, things like that. Okay. All right, that's good enough there. You get the idea. So now I'm going to clean my number 4 brush, and I'm going to use the lightest color green right here. And then I'm going to add some bright green grass, and I'm gonna dab a little bit. create the nice highlight. And then you can use a little bit of this and this darkest green, mix those two, and I'm going to bring it down a bit. I'm going to clean my brush. And we're going to add, let's pick up our flat brush, clean it out, the dark color, and then we're going to add the same thing, the brightest color, this green. We're going to add it right in here. Okay, something like that. Adding some color. And I'm gonna also add a little bit of a bright highlight from the sun. I want this to be, you know, have some reflection, and I'll show you what I'm doing. So I'm gonna pick up my detail brush and white and medium yellow straight out of the tube. And I'm gonna mix those. Get a in-between color, and because of the light, I'm going to create a bright highlight. Separation here. A little bit of white. By itself. Let's add some bright little highlights. Go over these areas. Maybe this light is hitting your rocks the strongest here. Want to follow. And then I'm just using medium yellow and randomly going over here, adding a little bit more color here to my grass. I'm going to clean my brush and use the darkest green color, and I'm going to try to clean it up here a little bit. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I think I'm going to add one more highlight right here to this rock. Bright one, so just use the white. All these little details Okay, switch to number 4, and I'm going to play with this color and some yellow, make some of my grass a little brighter. Just gently dab and use yellow to go over. I'm going to use a little bit of black, just straight out of the tube, and on the bottom here I'm going to add a little bit of a darker glaze on the bottom of my grass. Something like this. Okay, and you can also do the same technique, pluck it a little bit, make some of the lighter grass stand out, especially as you get closer, they get taller, right? Just like this, not too much. Okay, so now I'm going to go here and add a little bit of brighter grass. Okay, and now I'm going to come down, and what I'm going to do is switch my brush to number 8, and first thing I'm going to add the darker shadows. So with a little bit of water and the darkest green color we have mixed, we're going to add some darker shadows. And dip my brush in the water and use more water and paint so it can run soft. And this is our first base, so I'm going to add another darker shadow going in like this. And then there's going to be like a little bush here. Darker color there. And then this is going to be all dark. So I'm going to add up to this point. I'm going to add all this dark green. Like I said, we're going to cover some of this rock. I didn't like this rock. It was getting too close. I want to make my river a little shorter. So I'm going to go up like this. Kind of what we did with these right here. And we just adding a quick glaze. Okay, so there's going to be some dark shadows in here. Dab my brush lightly in the water. This is all going to be dark in here. And then as you get closer up here, let's use this tan color we mixed. Mix it all in there with the green. Why not? Mix it all in. Okay, and then let's use the next green color. And we're gonna just continue adding, filling in the canvas real quick. And then also here, I'm gonna use the lighter green. Lighter green here. There you go. And then if you wanted to, you could use your number or blending brush to take away the brush strokes, or to make sure the paint fills in and covers all the canvas as your first base. I'm going to just gently take away the brush strokes and blend here real quick with my M1, or you could use an M2. It just takes away the brush strokes, fills in all the canvas, so when you add the second layer, it'll be grip better and it'll be more solid. But there you have it. Okay, I'm going to continue finishing this section here, and this is what I have. A thumb amount of white, a little bit of sap green and medium yellow, less white here, more sap green, phthalo blue, and medium yellow. And then a little bit of white here. This is for colors for the flowers, and this is for the grass. A little bit of white, orange, and medium yellow. And then orange, a little more orange, and scarlet red. And then here I just have sap green and lamb black. And these are the colors I have right here. This is colors for the grass. We want light highlights and darker shadows for the bottom parts, right? And then we have for the flowers, we have a light orange, like a orangey dark red. And then I also added lamb black straight out of the tube. So something like this. And we're gonna start to add our second layer. So I'm gonna quickly pick up my number 4 brush and dab it in the water, tap it on the paper towel so it could be damp as always. And let's start with this green. Let's start adding a little bit like we did here. I also added a little faraway trees. You don't need to do this, but I got carried away and had fun with this. And a little glow right here of the light to create this separation from this right here and the far away. And remember, this is a little closer to us, so that's why it's a little taller right here, right? And this is further away, so it creates that separation. So I'm going to start from this side and start to add my grass. Very lightly. And dab my brush lightly in the water so I can have a little more water. That way it really runs smooth. And I'm going to skip some areas and fade it out. Okay, I'm going to continue. Okay. All right, let's use a little bit of this green, add some color. On the bottom, a little bit, not too much. Okay, and then let's use the darkest color and create some shadows, darker shadows right here. Okay. Now I'm going to switch to my number 8 brush. And we're going to add a little bit of a darker shadow on some of these parts right here. This is where our grass, the darkest, some of our grass will be. But before we start adding lighter highlights, it's easier to add these darker ones first, because this area is going to be pretty dark. And you can see I'm kind of skipping and moving my brush around, creating natural highlights inside. But this is going to be the darkest area here. For our flowers to stand out, this darker shadows will, once we add the lighter orange, it's going to make our flowers stand out a little more. So that's why I want to make this area on the bottom more shaded. And remember, there's like a little path or separation here. Maybe it goes down. And then finally, I'm going to use a little bit of black straight out of the tube and really make some of these even darker. Right here, where I think it's going to be the most darkest area here. So I'm just glazing it everywhere here. Okay. Some in here. And then the darkest color as well in here. I want this to be a little bit darker in here. Okay, and now I'm going to quickly switch to my flat brush, right? And dab it in the water, and with a little bit of water, and let's start with this green first. This green and some water. We're going to add some grass. And I'm going to start from, let's just start from this side. I'm going to just gently press and move my grass around with water. I'm barely pressing. I'm just kind of moving it maybe somewhere, You want to go different directions so that it won't look all the same, right? So a little bit of water and this green. We're going to and we can always correct, if I made it too big, I can always adjust with a darker color later. But for now, let's just continue and create our first glaze of our grass. It's going to look rough in a way, but we'll then add another layer with a lighter color, and it's going to really stand out more and more each time we add more. So a little bit here, and it's okay if you go up a little bit with your grass. So same color, let's just continue adding that. And then dab my brush in the water again. More of this green. Barely pressing. Maybe some are coming this way, like this. Okay, continue. A little more water in the green. Okay, a quick first layer. And now we can add the next color. I'm going to dab my brush in water and use this lighter green. Lighter, the lightest color with water. Same idea, I'm going to go over some of these and add highlights, brighter highlights. Make my grass stand out a little more. I'm not going to overdo it. I'm not going to add too much here. But I do want these brighter highlights here. And you can also use your detail brush if you want. But I usually do the detail brush later. I kind of get the first layers down quickly because it would take forever if I were to do this with my detail brush back and forth, you know. So that's why I'm kind of getting the first layers of my grass down with my flat brush. It's a lot faster. And then you can add in here. Dab my brush in the water, continue. And fade it out. And do the same thing right here. And now I'm gonna switch my brush to number 4 and kind of go over with the lighter color for the little sections, little grass. All right, before I continue detailing the grass in this area, I'm gonna add some flowers. My next thing is to use a detail brush and pick up paint, and we're gonna start with adding where we want our flowers to be. So it's totally up to you how big and how little you want them to be. But I'm gonna add some in here randomly, you know. They don't have to be perfect, right? Create some separations, maybe some of them are in here, and then maybe some in here, goes up a little bit. And add as many as you want, right? So I'm gonna go in here, add some little ones because they're fading in, going into maybe there's some in here. Okay, and add a lot of little ones here first. And you can really spend some time and make them look even more like as they get closer, they're going to look more and more like flowers, right? So for example, like this one's going to be bigger. I'm going to make it more like shaped, more like a flower, right? Like this. So don't worry about making them look perfect. But if you wanted to, you can. Totally up to you. Add a few here, a few in here. So okay, I'm going to continue. Adding these flowers. Remember the far away ones, you want to make them little, and then as you get closer they become a little more bigger and detailed. So as long as you keep that in mind, you can add as many as you want, or you could add just a few. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to quickly lay all my flowers down, and then I'll show you what I get. All right, you could see how I made these ones bigger here because they're closer to us. And now I'm going to continue adding a little bit of color, darker color with this orangey red that we mixed. And I'm just going to add it right in the middle of these flowers. Create a little more detail to them. And so I'll do that and to as much as I can here. And after I added that, I'm going to add some flowers on top right here. Maybe some of them are coming up, and I'm going to make some of these dark red and stand out a little bit. And you'll see once I start to add a little more detail to them, it's going to look really good. Okay, maybe one more in here. Why not? And then some in here. Some little ones in here, and a couple bigger ones right in here. Okay, and then as I go down, I'm going to add some inside. All these little flowers here. Okay, and then of course I'm going to clean my brush and connect those, and I'm going to use the darkest color. Let's mix it with a little bit of red. A little bit of red and the dark green. I'm going to swirl our detail brush, and I'm going to connect some of these. For example, right here, barely pressing on the canvas, and I'm going to bring it down gently. Connect all your little flowers. Same thing here. Let's bring this to the side more. Right? And I'm going to use a little bit of black and make these even darker on the bottom here. I want these flowers to stand out. Right on the bottom. And now it's going back and detailing everything. So before we start to detail our flowers, we're going to go back to the grass and start to make it look a little cleaner, detail and finalize our grass with the detail brush, right? And then after that, then we're going to finalize it, adding another layer to our flowers and making them look a little cleaner. So before I do, I'm going to quickly use this light orange, and let's use a little bit of black. Mix those two together, get like a lighter color, and then here I want to try to create maybe a little bit of highlights from the light hitting to our ground, some separations. Just a few places right here. Okay, just like that. Very small little areas, maybe even more orange over the top of these. That creates a little nice separation, little break from the grass. Okay, that's good right there. All right, so now we're going to detail everything. Go back with your detail brush and we're going to start making them look a little more cleaner. And so I'm going to use this green back and forth with water in my detail brush and really make them stand out a little better. So for example, right here, right, I'm going to barely press and I'm going to move some of them. Maybe some are coming out like this towards us, right? Maybe there's some on the side, right? So I'm going to really start to add those little details. Barely pressing. So it's a lot of back and forth with your detail brush and water. I'm just swirling my brush with water and this light green and add as many as you want. Light highlights. Okay, so that's what I'll do. I'm going to spend some time, maybe some grass are kind of falling. Okay. And in here, I'm going to do the same thing, connect some of these. And these ones are closer to us, so they have to be a little bit more thicker. So if you press a little bit more, it'll create a thicker grass. But you could see I'm kind of moving it around, creating some bigger ones, some smaller ones, right? Going from this angle to that angle so it won't be all straight. You don't want them to look flat. You want them to maybe somewhere kind of breaking here, right? And that creates some variety. See, these ones are a little closer to us, so I'm gonna press a little harder and bring it down. And here we're gonna have some that are coming towards us like this. Okay, so have fun with this and create as many as you want. Connect these. And it's okay if you go over some of your flowers. We're gonna detail them again and add more layers, so don't worry about that. And now I'm going to go back with the dark green and some water and glaze over, like right here, create a little bit of a darker shadow. So I'm going to correct some of this shadow so it won't be too flat. I want some areas to be lighter and some areas to be a little darker. So I'm going to use this color and try to add some darker separations. For example, right inside here, right? I want to make this a little bit darker in here. Create some darker shadows with water and that green. Okay, and in here, I'm going to add a little more darker areas. And then in here, I want to brighten this area up. So what I'm going to do is clean my brush and use a little bit of the green, light green and the dark, this green right here, the next green, mix those together. Maybe more of this green, and I'm going to just kind of dab a little bit in here. Like I said, it's okay if you go over your, so a little more of this green, go over your little lighter green. Your flowers, we're going to go back and detail those. So certain areas I want to make it a little brighter to create some separation, you know, shadows, and a little bit in here. Skip some areas, but mainly in here I wanted to brighten this up. Maybe the light is hitting part of this grass area in here. So I wanted to lighten that up a bit. Let's lighten some of these areas in here. Barely pressing. Okay, and then I'm going to go back. I'm going to use my flat brush or your detail brush, whatever you're more comfortable. Let's use this green and get an in-between color so it won't be too light. Something like this, a nice green like this with water, and we're going to just try to add a little bit more cleaner grass here. Okay, continue. All right, basically it's a lot of the same thing, back and forth playing with your grass, shaping it the way you like it, right? So I'm going to continue to show you the next step. I'll come back to detailing the grass later on my own time, and it's totally up to you how much detail you want to add to it. But the next part after you're done with the grass, right, we're going to continue and add details to our flowers. If your paint is dried up, that's okay, because you know, if, mine's not, because I just was working on the grass here. But if you, let's say, spent a lot of time on the grass and your paint is dry, just mix similar colors. It does not have to look exactly the same, okay? So a little bit of this light orange, detail brush, and some water, and we're going to correct and make it look even more detailed and cleaner. For example, right here, right? I'm going to make it a little more cleaner by adding these little details, and then mainly on the closer flowers, they're going to be the most detailed, right? And then for this red part, I'm going to mix a little bit of this together, and I'm going to try to create a transition, a little bit of a smoother transition. So I'm going to play with these colors for fun, try to create a little bit of a softer transition. Okay, like this. And then you could use a little bit of the darker color to create some separations. Okay, a little more of this orange in here where you think it needs it. You don't want them to all look like this. You want some of them on the side, move it around, you know, facing different directions, because we don't want it to be too perfect. Like this one is facing more this way, right? So play with your flowers, move them around, and that's basically the last step. So I'm going to spend some time working on adding details, kind of like what I did here, right? I'm going to do that to all my flowers here, correct them, and then play with that orange color, create a transition, softer transition. And after I'm done with that, I'll show you what I get. Mainly I'm going to detail the bigger ones right here. The far away ones, I'm going to spend a little bit of time correcting just a little bit of it, not too much, right? Also create a soft transition. All right, you could see I spent some time detailing my flowers, adding the darker red shadows, and just mainly to the closer ones, right? So I did that, and the final step is to add a glaze over them so they won't look all one color. we want to create a little bit of a red shade to them. So I added a little bit of scarlet red, and let's pick up our number 8 brush, dab it in the water, and tap it on the paper towel. We're gonna add a glaze like this, and with water and a little bit of this paint, right, we're gonna just glaze it over on some of our flowers here. That'll make them look a little more pinkish, take away the brightness just a bit. Okay, I know maybe on the camera you can't see it that well, but this makes it look a little more pinkish instead of just orange. So I'm going to add that glaze in here randomly, just the red by itself. It'll make my flowers more on the pink side, which I want. Okay, glaze it over gently with water. And once you're done with that, you can also glaze the dark green color and some black. You could do the same thing, kind of glaze it on the edges on the bottom and on some parts right here to give it more depth. And here it is. I'll be done for today. You could also see I added some pink to my flowers for fun. This is a good time to take a break, step back, see if you need to adjust anything, correct, or add more details to the sky, grass, rocks, water, flowers, right? Totally up to you. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you found this video helpful. All right, my friends, take care and God bless.